What's up, everybody? Welcome to today's episode of All Smith, where we dive deep into the world of fitness, competition, and athletic excellence. Today, we're tackling a topic that's been sparking debates and pushing the limits that we consider the pinnacle of human performance: the CrossFit Games and the Olympics. The CrossFit Games, often dubbed the ultimate test of fitness, brings together the fittest on earth to compete in grueling events that challenge strength, endurance, agility, and mental toughness. Meanwhile, the Olympics have been the gold standard of athletic achievement for over a century, showcasing the best athletes from around the globe in a wide range of sports. In this episode today, we'll explore similarities and differences between these two monumental events and discuss what it means to be the fittest on earth with former champion Matt Fraser, or overcoming adversity with CrossFit Games athlete Haley Adams. And then we're going to consider if CrossFit could ever find a place on the Olympic stage. On the Olympic side of things, we will unpack the stories of swimming bronze medalist Caroline Burkle and high-level gymnastics and Olympic alternate Dave Durante. Whether you're a die-hard CrossFit fan, an Olympics enthusiast, or just someone who loves some good old-fashioned competition, this episode is for you. Let's start the conversation. Free is the way to be. Life beats us up a bit and causes some bumps and bruises, but that doesn't mean we have to stay on the sidelines. This is why we've partnered with Kinyon Labs. Get back to doing what you love with this incredible portable device designed to get you back in the game. Kinyon is on a mission to move people from pain to possible with their top-rated red light therapy and laser solution, which tackles inflammation along with muscle and joint pain quickly and effectively. What I love is that it's portable and rechargeable, making it easy to actually incorporate into my everyday life consistently. It's small and lightweight, so you can throw it in your gym bag or work bag, or even an overnighter. Kinyon's lasers and LED combo make this cutting-edge device extremely versatile for use with general aches and pains, as well as chronic back pain, arthritis, post-surgery recovery, endometriosis, and more. This has been an amazing tool keeping my elbows and knees pain-free for pressing, pulling, and squatting in the gym. Great tools like the Move Plus give me the freedom and flexibility to continue living life on my terms without limitations. There are a lot of reasons why over 15,000 people are using this device and rating it 4.7 stars and above. Head on over to kinyon.io and use code ALLSMITH at checkout to begin your pain-free journey.
I looked at, my 2014, 2015 season. It's equivalent to me. It was as equivalent as getting fired from a job. I didn't do good enough to get praised for it, get rewarded for it. So I'm like, what did I do wrong? How can I better myself and do it again, do it properly?
I love the way you segued that into the 2014, 2015 season, because I have it here, but it's really cool that you reflected on that and you were specific to your habits. And you were like, you know what? I hated that 2015 medal, but I was very happy that I had that to reflect on, because had I won, I would have thought that all those bad habits and corner cutting and doing the wrong things with my diet, nutrition, and sleep and recovery were okay. And it probably wouldn't have led to this amazing career that you did ultimately end up having. Will you reflect on that a little bit and how that pivotal moment in time really helped motivate and inspire the rest of your CrossFit career?
Absolutely. So after the 2014 games, so 2014 medal, I was doing backflips. I was like, this is phenomenal. I went into the competition with no expectations. I didn't know what I was doing. I made some wild mistakes that even in the moment, I was like, oh, that was a fuck up. But I had no experience. So why would I expect to be able to do everything correctly the first time? No, absolutely not. I'm going to make mistakes. And so I was doing backflips over that medal. I was so proud of it. And then 2015 season, exact same results, second place again. And And I went into a dark, dark place of like, I didn't know if I wanted to do it again. I didn't know if I wanted to keep competing, because it became a very real possibility to me that I can finish my career without ever standing on top of the podium. And that's a big, big hit to the pride, to the ego. And, and I'm like, I don't feel like I'm being rewarded for an entire year's work to finish there. And then so I probably took 3 or 4 months off after the 2015 games, where I didn't go to the gym. I didn't know if I wanted to sign up again. And it really made me sit down just with a pen and paper and a spiral notebook, and jot down, why am I so upset about this? Because 2014, 2015, to somebody looking from the outside, they're identical. I got the exact same results, but the emotions tied to either one are polar opposites. And I came to a couple conclusions. I act like a 3-year-old to myself, and I'll make a statement and go, why? And then I'll dig deeper. Why? Why was I upset about the 2015 season? Oh, I didn't get the results I didn't want. Well, why? Well, I didn't do everything right outside of the gym. Why? And it was almost like a defense mechanism. I prided myself that I was as good as I was while carrying these bad habits, because I got a kick out of it when I would train with Katrin, and her nutrition's dialed in, her mobility's dialed in, her sleep is dialed in, her training's dialed in. And then I thought it was the sense of pride that, like, if I beat her in a workout and then I immediately started eating a pint of Ben and Jerry's, or I beat her in a workout and then I stayed up until 2 a.m. watching Netflix, I'm like, man, I'm not even trying. And I'm still beating you. Well, then the one year she won and I didn't. And I was like, oh shit. All right. Well, I need to stop protecting my ego and giving myself this excuse or this out of, oh, you got me in that workout, but hell, I stayed up until 2 a.m. last night. My diet is I still eat Chinese food every day. I was giving myself these excuses to protect my pride and ego. But then I realized that the 2015 medal, it was so upsetting to me because it didn't reflect my potential. I knew that whole season was cut corners of doing no mobility work. My sleep was shit. My diet was everything that could be bad was bad. And so I just went, all right, I need to stick my neck out, make myself vulnerable, do everything as perfectly as I can. But then there's still a possibility that I'm not going to get the results I want. And I need to be okay with that. And so I decided, like, nope, if I take 1 year, which in the grand scheme of things is, a blip, it's such a small part of your life. And it wasn't even a full year. It was 1 season. So, more like 8 months. I'm going to do 8 months where I do every single thing perfectly. And if I still don't win, I'm going to be fine with it, because there wasn't a single other thing I could do. Whereas in the 2015 season, I look back, I'm like, what was the straw that broke the camel's back? What was the final fork in the road that winning was no longer an option? Like in the last month of the games, if I went to bed at the proper time, would that have been enough to allow me to win? Or if my diet, what ice cream cone was the final fork in the road that stopped me from winning? And I just went, I'm not going to have any what ifs. I'm going to dedicate myself to this. And it's not, I'm going to finish the season, either go, all right, either I got the result I wanted or I didn't, but there's not going to be a single what if.
Yeah, for sure. No stone unturned seems to be a very common theme in your story that keeps coming up, which is, It's super cool to see and hear you talk about that. I'd like to take a moment to thank our friends over at Vuori. They are bringing a new perspective on performance apparel. Their products are incredibly versatile and allow for freedom and flexibility in any arena. As humans, we are complex creatures, always on the move and always on the go. Allow Vuori to join you as you navigate the complexities of the human experience. Whether you are training, adventuring, lounging, traveling, or attending meetings, Vuori has options to suit your active lifestyle. My personal favorites are the men's core short and their line of Ponto performance products, which are so incredibly soft. Check these guys out over at vuori.com/invictusmindset for 20% off your very first purchase and free shipping. That's VUORI.com/Invictus Mindset for 20% off your very first purchase and free shipping. Everything they have is designed to work out in, but doesn't look or feel like it. It's so freaking comfortable that you won't want to wear anything else. Breathing, movement, circulation, digestion. What do all these body functions have in common? Our muscles. There are over 600 muscles in the human body that are responsible for supporting our daily activities. That's why your muscle health is incredibly important. On this podcast, I always discuss seeking our peak expression and striving to maximize our human potential. And so I try to share with you the top products that I find on the market. My H&B is a clinically proven ingredient that has been shown to help build and maintain lean muscle mass, increase strength, improve recovery, and enhance body composition. Learn more about your muscle health at myhmb.com/Invictus. Once again, that's myhmb.com/Invictus. Enhance your muscle health and enhance your life. When you were training at that time, you've now worked with some of the masterminds within the CrossFit space. You know, at that time it was Ben Bergeron. You've worked a little bit with the Mayhem crew and Rich down there in Cookeville. And then you've also crossed paths a little bit with Shane Orr and Tia and the Proving crew a little bit. And, you know, everywhere in your journey, it just seems like you're gathering more tools for your toolbox and then taking all these wide array of arsenals and ingredients and then kind of making them your own and, you know, changing them by just 1% here and there. And it's so cool to see, but does anything stand out in your mind from, you know, those early days working? We'll start with Ben Bergeron.
You know, it's tough to know where I picked certain things up because it's been a long journey. You know, I started competing in weightlifting when I was 12 years old. So, you know, I had my original weightlifting coach. And then every summer I would move up, or like in my later teen years, I would move up to, Thunder Bay, Ontario, and work with a coach up there, Larry Shepard. So my original coach, Chris Polakowski, I would work with Larry Shepard during the summers. And then even there were some assistant coaches I would work with. Then I moved to the training center, and Paul Fleshler was the coach there. And then the next coach was Bob Morris. And you know, working with all these different coaches, and never mind just the coaches, the athletes as well, you know, I'm observing them. Hey, why are you doing this? Why do you change your grip? Why do you like all these different things? And then once I started in CrossFit, I've had the opportunity to the first person that did individualized programming for me was the owner of the gym here, Jay Jenny. And then, you know, I met Chris Henshaw. I've been down to Cookeville, trained with Rich. I've worked with Shane and Tia. Worked with Ben Bergeron and all the people that and then outside of that, working on the specialty, you know, I've been to sprint camps. I've been to swimming camps. I've worked with powerlifting coaches, strongmen, all these people that are specialty workers. And then not even that. Now look at anyone that's been successful that is in my life that I'm friends with. So like you mentioned Evan Hafer. He was the Evan that I was referring to. So many things in his story. We have parallels. Like when I hung out with Sean White, like we were together for a week and we're talking about our journeys. And Sammy was cracking up when Sean and I were telling stories back and forth, because she was like, your stories are identical. They are perfect parallels, but he's doing it with snowboarding. I'm doing it with CrossFit. I have a buddy, Joel, that he builds monster trucks. We have no similarities in our day-to-day life. But the stories of how we fell into, like, how the fuck do you start building monster trucks, you know? Like, but the parallels that we've had in our stories and the obstacles we've had to overcome, I pulled just as much from Sean White's stories and experiences and Joel's stories and experiences as I did from Bergeron, or working with different like Henshaw or Chad Wesley for powerlifting advice, you know? And with so many of them as well, you'd sit down, have a conversation, and, you know, you're kind of going through different mantras or sayings or how they think they should conduct themselves. And I remember specifically, like with Bergeron. Bergeron's big on, mental toughness, adversity, all this stuff, and he would sit down as athletes and basically have like a 45-minute presentation, and it would be what he thought was really important and things that he thought would help his athletes. And I would challenge him on a lot of things, and but then I realized that, we don't have to agree on everything. Like, you don't need to, every piece of advice someone gives you, if you don't agree with it, you don't have to take it. And so Ben would, kind of give one of these talks and say he had 10 bullet points. And I would be sitting there listening, and I'd be like, all right, 8 of those I don't agree with at all. I think they're terrible ideas. I'm going to just, boom, wipe them off. And then there's one that I'm like, oh, okay, I agree with that. And then there'd be one that I'm like, oh, I'm going to take that and carry it with me through the rest of my career. And just because I didn't agree with those other 8 doesn't mean that 10th one isn't phenomenal and life-changing. And that's how I conducted myself with all these other people. I'm there. You don't have to agree with every single thing that this person does. But if there's one thing that relates to you, you're like, oh, I'm just going to take that and I'm going to put it in my pocket and I'm going to apply it. And so, I worked with Ben for a couple of years, and, we parted ways, and, we've remained friends. I remember, like, the same season that I ended it with him, we were going into regionals. So this is 4 months later, and I'm like, hey Ben, I need your help. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. What do you need? And there were things from Ben that I carried with me through the rest of my career, from Henshaw, from different random training partners. Like, I remember one year before the games, I trained with Cara Saunders for like 2 weeks. She was in the States and needed a place to train. I was like, yeah, come on up to Vermont. We trained together for 2 weeks. And there were things from training with her that I was like, oh, I like that. I'm going to take that and apply it forward,
That's super cool. I love the concept. Take what you need and leave the rest.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's kind of what you've done in all these different avenues. You mentioned like taking some of these things and applying them to the rest of your life. And I've heard you tell a story where I forgot who it was, but the Buttery Bros put together a video with someone, and you hit up Marston. You're like, hey man, like I wanna share that and save it in my phone so Sammy and I can watch that every day for motivation.
Yep.
Do you recall the story that I'm referring to?
It was Brian Callen.
Yeah.
And so I've actually done those Marston a couple of times. Some of them were things that people said that got me riled up. And when I was training, I have a folder on my phone of resentments, of things that people said that pissed me off. And I was like, I used them there for fuel of like the days I didn't have the motivation to do it for myself. I'm like, I'm going to do it to prove them wrong. But I also have a folder of, positive things, quotes that I saw that I really liked, or video clips from another athlete or someone that, has a trait that I want, and to keep it fresh. And it was Brian Callen talking about, and you hear it all the time with comedians of like, they bombed on stage for 10 years until they finally cracked the code. And then they became successful. And Brian was talking about, he was like, for, 20 years, he's like, I bombed. Then I'd have one good thing, and then bomb, have one good thing. And he goes, it was something like, he's like, picture it as like throwing rocks at birds. And if I got a bird, I got it stuffed and hung it on the wall. And he goes, over the years, yeah, if you walked into my house, there'd be 25 birds on the wall, and somebody would go, wow, what are all these birds? He goes, I hit them with rocks. And they go, wow, you must be really good at throwing rocks. And he goes, I'm fucking awesome at throwing rocks. And he goes, the person at the end doesn't know that I threw 100,000 rocks at birds, but they see the end result. So like basically how you opened up the podcast of 5-time CrossFit Games champion, author of a book, I own a couple income properties, launched Podium, all these things. And it's like, wow, you must be really good at throwing rocks. And then I'm like, yeah, I'm fucking awesome at throwing rocks. All the misses aren't on the wall. There's been plenty more failures than there have ever been successes. And I anticipate that it's going to continue being like that.
The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the sweet cream cold brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level.
There's so many different modalities that I think the world does not conceptualize around a high-level professional athlete.
That comment is probably one of my biggest pet peeves. But it's not just training, right? As soon as you leave the gym, you're counting your calories. You're wondering what you're going to do tomorrow. Like, you're trying to take care of this injury, and you're trying to recover, and you're trying to go to bed on time. You're trying to wake up. Like, it's nonstop. Like, it's not just, oh, I'm going to work out and do all this fun stuff all day. No, it is not that. It is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And also, not to mention, what you just described is the natural recovery process. That doesn't even include life.
Yeah,
you still are going to have days where you got to go to the DMV. You got to get on the internet and answer emails. You still have obligations for social posts. You still got to go to the grocery store. There's still life. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that gets lost in the midst of like, oh, must be nice to train all day. But in reality, the reward of the gym to the recreational human being of, hey, I'm going to go for an hour a day and I'm going to move and I'm going to chase a pump. Like, they may have optimal body composition, have some really good performance metrics as well. But those that are truly professionals, man, it's tough.
It's really hard. It's not just fun. Yeah. Not just fun.
I think it's very important to paint that picture. Going back to Mal, have you spoken to her? Has she been able to kind of step away and heal and do some fun things? And, you know, their HWPO crew seems like they roll tight, and everybody's kind of in the mix pretty frequently.
Yeah. Like I said, we have a snap streak that we keep up with every day. I think she's just out living her life too, you know, working on herself and just taking it step by step, kind of the same way that I am, and just enjoying life and just kind of, just seeing what it's all about, you know?
Totally. One of my favorite phrases is you're truly living, you're not just existing. And CrossFit no longer has invisible handcuffs on you.
Yeah.
And Haley, when we look back at your journey, at least from my humble lenses from the outside looking in, it really appeared like you developed a very special relationship with Tasia.
Okay.
And you know, before we get into that, though, I just want to note real quickly, like, I think all of us are going to go through things in our lives, and there's going to be those people that they just happen to be there. And maybe they don't always do anything. Maybe they don't always say anything. But just their sheer presence and knowing that you can feel their energy is so special and so healing. And I've crossed paths with Tasia a few times, and she's a very special woman. It was very cool to see the two of you guys form this deep trust and this sister-like love with one another.
Yeah.
In the pursuit of you know, her exit kind of from competitive CrossFit and kind of co-piloting your journey towards the top of the sport.
Yeah. So Tasia is just an angel in my life. I do not deserve her. She is the kindest person that I know. But our relationship started back in 2019. When they had a team. So it was Rich, Dre, Tasia, and China. And obviously China lived in California. And I had made the individual games this year, but they're like, well, Haley, you're doing our team training. So I hopped in every day with the team, and Tasia and I would always pair up. And I was still kind of new to Tennessee. So I was a little shy, and she kind of just took me under her wing, and we had so much fun every day trying to beat the boys, and that's really where we started to get close. And then the next year when she decided to step back, and she spent the whole summer training the COVID games with me, like every day. Even though she wasn't competing anymore, she didn't miss a day, always showed up for me. And then it was a no-brainer when we could only take one person. I was like, well, I'm taking Tasia. But that weekend, that I competed in California for the COVID Games really, really brought us close because there was so much that went on behind the scenes that was just insane. But just getting to experience all of that with her, and she knows me better than probably most people. And she not only just knows me in CrossFit, she knows all my struggles, and she's just someone in my life that I can come to no matter what, and she's saved me from so much, and I'll never be able to repay her for what she's done for me, and she's just amazing, and everyone needs a Tasha in their life. Seriously.
I love that. COVID, what a time.
Oh my goodness.
So hard to train, different across state lines, varying opinions, so many different narratives being pushed by the media. But specifically in the CrossFit space, most gyms were closed. It was hard to get training in. Then when you did figure out training, whether that was in public places or potentially in your home, there was so much judgment that came with it. Why are you focused on training? You should be focused on the bigger problems in the world. And we weren't sure how the season was going to go. There was a lot of fluctuation, changes with all kinds of rules and perimeter. The game's going to happen, are they not going to happen? Where are they going to take place? Who's going to be allowed to go? And ultimately, they did take place. How did that year impact you? And what was training like that year? I'm sure there was fluctuation with inconsistency for sure.
That year stands out by far the most to me out of any year, just because it was, number one, insane. Also, our season went from like February to, if you made it, the end of October, which was also, if you know anything about CrossFit, insane to be training that hard for that long. But it was also really special that year because I'd come off a decent finish in 2019, but I wasn't so sure if I could pull off the top 5 in stage 1 because I was like, I don't know. I was convinced I got lucky the year before because I had so many people hating on me because of, how to bring it up, but just for my strength. So I thought that maybe that year was a fluke, and I was like, well, I'm just not going to get my hopes up. I'm just going to try my best to make it, like, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up making it, which was a huge surprise. I'm sure everyone's seen the video of me making it. But that was probably one of my favorite moments just because I had my small group of people, obviously because COVID there. But I just got to share that moment with all of them, and they're like, it just really solidified the whole year for me, and how it had been such a rough year for everyone. It felt like there was just a little good that had come out of it, and I was so excited that I was going to be top 5 in aromas in California.
That's so cool. Yeah, it was a special time. And
yeah.
Haley, you're such a fierce competitor. I love watching you compete because it's like, I grew up watching Michael Jordan, and, within the basketball world, it's like there's a lot of shit talking, and you're just like, you're friends off the court, but once you get on the court, you're not my friend anymore. I'm trying to beat you, and I don't care. Yeah. And I'm going to look at you a certain way, and I'm going to push your buttons, and I'm going to do all the things because that is what it is to be a competitor. And you get that, but sometimes in CrossFit, I feel like there's this niceness where everybody's like overly bubbly and nice. And you bring this like different swagger to the sport where like, we've all seen the pictures of like the Haley Adam like stare to the side.
Yeah.
It's so good. And you mentioned, people are going to hate, right? They're going to talk about strength numbers and this, that, and the other. And it's like, okay, you can hate on whatever numerical values on the one event in the sport that's a 1 rep max, but you're not going to acknowledge all the other things that I'm top 5 in. Like, let's have an honest conversation and call a spade a spade.
That doesn't matter.
But what is cool is no matter what, you've still been working on your strength. It's something that has, lived a little bit in your program design, and it's something that you have really put a lot of time and energy into in previous years and obviously into the now. What is that like? Like having this thing that like, I'm sure a lot of people out there can relate where it's like, man, I'm trying so hard. Yeah. And some people that don't try that hard, they just get the results really fast. And then for other people based on, their body composition, their genetics, it's just like, it's a slower progress.
Right. Like
what advice, would you give to people on that same journey, and how's it been for you trying to acquire bigger strength numbers?
Everything else in CrossFit, I felt like came to me so easily and so fast. But like that was the one thing from the start that like I had trouble squatting 65 pounds when I first started CrossFit, and I made the games that year. Like it just did not come naturally to me, and obviously my form wasn't great, but even when my form got better, like my numbers still were not even close. And it was something from the beginning that has just like constantly been like in my ear of just like, you have to do this, this, this. I'm like, I'm trying so hard. And especially as I started to get more like recognition, like I don't know, it's so hard to have the one thing you're just trying so hard. And I've done everything. I've done every squat program, this, that, and it's taken me a lot slower than it is everyone else. And I'm like okay with that now, but like even last year in the off season, I'm like, okay, we're gonna squat every day because that's what you have to do, you piece of crap. Like we're gonna do it. Like we're gonna get big, and it's just not like that sometimes. And I'm thankful for the other, fitness I have, and that it gets me top 10 every year. But like, this is just a little bit slower, and I'm still working on it. I'm trying, and that's just okay.
Totally. For sure. I always love the statement, never allow what you can't do affect what you can do.
Yeah.
And I think you did a really good job of that. Like even in the off season, you're like, you know what, I'm going to back off some of my Metcon, some of my conditioning in pursuit of, different versions of small off squat cycles, and, integrating those into slightly different ways, like not just squatting, but Olympic weightlifting and pressing and pulling and different deadlift cycles as well, and trying anything and everything in pursuit of trying to get stronger and get better. Yeah. And it's interesting because you did such a good job of pursuing that. But I also think it's important to note, in doing that, you're going to sacrifice sometimes the things that you're really good at already. Mm-hmm. And so CrossFit's so interesting because it's this give and take. You're going to get one thing, but you got to give up something else. Yeah. And it's like a game of percentages. How much do you want to give up to try to get incremental progress over here, when over here you're potentially, a top 5 finish?
Right. It's really interesting, actually. Since I've taken some time off, like I even took time off of lifting because I was like, I just have to, like, I can't mentally deal with this. And I wasn't sure, like, at that time, like March, April, like, am I going to go back? Like, do I want to do this again? So I'm like, I need some time. But now, like, that my body, because obviously it gave my body time to heal. My body feels the best that it has ever felt. And like, I've been doing some like a squat cycle the last few weeks, and some of the people that were helping me, they're like, wow, you're fast. And I said, I feel like I'm squatting differently. Like, I don't know what it is, but like, I felt like I had power, like for the first time. And I think it's because my body wasn't so beat down, or like I'm fueling myself, or just all these little things that come together. And it gave me a second of like, oh, like this is, like, I can be better, like it just was a moment of hope.
I love that. It's also just a reminder that sometimes less is more. And more is not better. Better is better.
Yeah.
Allowing those tissues to heal rather than every day being like, oh, those first few squats are a little sticky.
Every day, just like slamming it in the ground. I'm like, maybe I just like, because the thing is, I feel like it was so easy for people to be like, she needs to do more strength. This is blah, blah, blah. I think I was doing too much on top of like a ton of Metcons, but I do like 30 squat cleans per time at 185 and like squat again after that. And like, I think I was honestly just doing too much, but I was just working so hard to get better that I just thought that was helping me.
Yeah, for sure. It's such a great learning lesson to try to figure out where is that red line.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily mean like the Metcon red line, but like, what can your individual body recover from?
Right.
And sometimes when you have an incredible work ethic, as you do, sometimes you're like, self-reliance is everything. I'm going to push through every obstacle. The haters are going to see. I'm going to use that as intrinsic motivation. Yeah. I'm going to eat more food. I'm going to sleep more. I'm going to do everything in my power to prove everybody wrong. And then in doing so, you don't even realize that you're almost hurting yourself by doing too much. But it's with positive intention. So you can't carry regret with it. But it's just, man, I wish I would have learned that like a split second sooner.
Yeah. No, trust me, I agree. Especially when I was younger, I would just do trash volume just so much. And it was just like, I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, like how did I not get hurt? Like I'm very lucky I did not. But
I'm sure it taught you a lot though. I'm sure it was a state change, probably helped your mind a little bit as you were navigating just different things within your growth trajectory. Yeah. What was it like making the move over to Mayhem? Mayhem has obviously gained a lot of notoriety.
Yeah.
A ton of champions have come out of there. They've got a lot of media coming out of there. Obviously, Rich and the crew is down there. And, how's that been for you with the constant influx of athletes coming in and out? And I'm sure there's never a shortage of training partners.
Yeah. So I moved there in 2018. I was only 17, little baby. Moved away from my home in North Carolina, just with the intention to be on one of their teams, which fell away very fast when I made the games as an individual, and we're just like, okay, you're going. But yeah, I've obviously had some of the best training partners in the sport there. They helped shape me into the athlete that I am today, and obviously I've made a lot of close friends out of the gym. But yeah, there's always a ton of different personalities there. You never know what you're gonna get, including myself. Yeah, it's a really great place to train, and I'm thankful for what they've given me in the sport and the opportunities that they've given me. And yeah.
Do any major moments kind of stand out for you of any particular workouts with anybody there? Something funny happened, or you remember, just like you mentioned previously, like a turning point where you gained this personal confidence around like, wow, this is really what I'm meant to do?
I wouldn't say there was one turning point, just because the first year I was there, I just got beat down so much. Like, it was so much volume, and these people were so good that I was just like, well, we're just gonna keep trying. So yeah, we also did so many workouts, so I just can't think of one.
Yeah.
But just through the years, like, I obviously got better, and then I kind of got a voice too. Like, I wasn't quiet, shy Haley anymore. I was like, oh, that's like sassy Haley, and like, yeah, and obviously created, better relationships with people. But I would say a moment that really sticks out to me was probably when I made the games for stage 1 in 2020, just because it was a very small environment, but it was all the people that had helped me get there. It was in Rich's barn. That one really sticks out for me.
Move fast and break shit. LSKD develops functional sportswear with a streetwear aesthetic that's on a mission to inspire you to chase the vibe through sport, fitness, and adventure. I train daily in the rep shorts and love the versatility they offer. The zipper pocket is an absolute game changer. I go from training at the gym directly to meetings, running errands, or prepping for podcasts. The LSKD tribe has become true family, and we are excited to continue to develop our community. Shop now at lskd.com and use code ALLSMITH. We chase the vibe here at AllSmith. Let's all become 1% better every day.
You're doing a lot. You're the co-founder of Rise Athletes, which is a pretty cool thing that was really focused on forging healthier lives for the next generation of Olympians. And you've had just a phenomenal career of so many accolades, which our listeners were able to kind of pinpoint a little bit in your intro. But what I want to really point out, Caroline, is you're all of those things, but you're none of those things. And simultaneously, you've been so brave and courageous to share your journey with self-actualization. And that's not always easy for someone in your shoes with this spotlight, with this expectation. And so, how did this journey towards self-actualization kind of begin?
I love that you say that, though. Just to be honest, I always struggled a lot when people just noticed my accomplishments and never who I was as a person. So I just want you to know that means a lot to me. The journey to self-actualization was a long time coming. And honestly, the word self-actualization, I wouldn't have even known what that meant a decade ago when I was going through it. So now I know what it means. But, at the time, it was just this complete understanding of, I know that this sporting career is amazing. I know that I could keep going for X amount of years. At the time when I'm speaking from this 23, 4-year-old mind. And also, I know there's more. And And I don't know what that more is, and I don't understand what that more is, and I'm terrified as hell of what that more is, and I don't want to do it at the same time that I do, but I have to. Like, I felt this whole visceral calling to understand myself better, and I had a very good head on my shoulders of this career will feel the same right now in this moment if I retire from it as it would in 4 more years, 2 more years at the next Olympic Games. Like, it would feel the same to me, regardless of if I won more medals and did more things. Like, I would still be in the same position of choosing, of being at the fork in the road and choosing which direction I want to go. So I truly just bought into that process and went for it. And I went for it in a way that was somewhat healthy, in other ways wasn't so healthy. Of I'm going to go down the path that's less traveled right now. It's not just continuing to compete over and over again until I'm blue in the face, just hoping for that next medal or hoping for that next win. I loved competing, but that wasn't who I was as a person, and I knew that. But that path of self-actualization was a decade long. It's still, still going. I'm on the outskirts of it, but it's still going. Of who am I outside of sport? What has sport taught me that I can utilize in my life now? And what is my pattern that maybe wasn't so healthy even within sport that I carried on? And how can I break that patterning if it's not healthy for me? So those things have been what I've really focused on. And the patterning piece has blown my mind. It has completely rocked my world and flipped it upside down to the thing that made me great also is the thing that caused me depression
Mm-hmm.
and get hurt and injured when I retired and to be sick and malnourished and all of the things. So it's like this like twisted brain thing that happens of like the thing that I was so good at, which is driving into the wall, go, 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 like making it happen is the thing that caused the demise of my health.
Mm-hmm.
And so finding the balance of that and understanding that pattern and what that really meant for me.
I really appreciate you sharing all that. And I'm also just curious, like, you were competing at such a high level that I may be wrong here, but I'm speculating that maybe the fork in the road wasn't present in your headspace when you were in the middle of it. But then after the Olympic Games, once you kind of reached that North Star, questions started to arise. Was there a moment? Was there a conversation that you had with somebody or with yourself? Was it a journaling session where you then became more of a thinking athlete versus, where you were before, which is like play, all gas, no brakes?
People may not like this answer because it's hard to quantify. But I wasn't a journaler. I wasn't a thinker. I was a feeler. And I felt things that are very hard to explain. I'm very well aware that in our society now, people want like specific examples of this is what I did, this is the thing that I did. And I've never really had them because what I noticed is it was a string of events of feeling like I was like in this yearning space of like, I feel like I have more to give and I'm not fulfilled, if that makes sense. Like, this is great, but I'm not fulfilled. So it was like a series of events there, to talk about like what that felt like is I would swim a race, I would finish, I would do great, and I would still be unwilling to accept that that was it. Like, there's got to be like, really, like that, like it's not, there's so like, where's the meaning? Like, I couldn't find my meaning for it anymore. And I think that was the slow drip of like, I could win a race or do all these things. And I just would be finished feeling like, okay, that's good. Like, what am I doing this for? And like, what's the meaning behind this? And I started to feel this hollowed out experience within me to where I was going through the motions. And that feeling of going through the motions started to give me information about where I was at. And I did have one really powerful conversation in the heat of the moment that I decided to retire. And it was with Amanda Beard, one of my close friends still. She was a fantastic 4-time Olympic medalist, Olympian. She's incredible, a beautiful human being. And I was in Irvine, California, and that was where nationals were. I swam not great, to say the least. And this was my very last competition. And I will never forget the feeling of, I just remember this completely through feeling like getting out of the water, walking over to the warm down pool, which is a separate pool from the competition pool, sitting on the side of the gutter. I just started crying. Like I was not a crier after races. Like even if I did horribly, I just didn't care. I just didn't cry. I would try to move forward. And if I cried, it was like by myself or, in another place, but it was never in a public setting like that. And I just lost it. And she came over and sat down next to me and she was like, "What are you feeling?" And I was like, I'm done. Like I can't explain it. I don't know. I have this feeling that like I'm just in the motion of this and I feel ready. And she was like, "Well, you just got out of the race, like breathe, like warm down, don't make any, crazy decisions or anything." And I was like, I'm exhausted. And in that moment, I recognized that I was going through the motions because of that empty, hollow feeling of this emotional unavailability that the sport was giving me as a relationship anymore. Like it wasn't giving me emotions anymore. It was I was content with what I had accomplished. Like I was so happy. I had the great career. My friends, I loved it all, but there were so many things that I just felt empty with emotionally when it came to the sport. It's not that I hated it at all. I loved it. It was just it had run its course. And I think it's fair to say I also had a lot of painful things happen during my career that were emotionally painful that had probably contributed to sucking me dry in that way of losing the meaning. Like, what am I in here for? Um, and yeah, so that's a long-winded way of just saying that, like, I don't have specific things that were just like light bulb went off, but it was just this slow drip of something doesn't feel right and I'm losing my meaning here and I'm emotionally empty with this and I need to either take a break or I need to be finished.
Totally. I've never heard somebody describe it as well as you just did. And I want to take a moment to really highlight our world is so obsessed with metrics. What are times? What are numerical values? How do we quantify this? But within this human experience, there's plenty of things that science and numbers can't explain. And there is this unique mystical component that comes with the miracle of moments, the magical feeling you have with the presence of somebody, an energy you feel. Maybe it's during a sunset, maybe it's during exposure, as we discussed briefly before, or it's within the unique intimacy of a special conversation. And it's so fascinating because our world places so much value on metrics because of in my humble opinion, capitalism. They're trying to find ways to quantify it for a monetary growth. And in reality, it's like we leave this world with nothing except our memories and the love and what we've given. And you gave so much of yourself to the sport. And you came to this unique fork where you're like, okay, I don't feel like this is a reciprocated relationship anymore. I'm full of gratitude where I can take these transferable skills into this next chapter where I can now experience a little bit more meaning. And I can't help but reference Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And in this case, I'm hearing Woman's Search for Meaning, right? Between stimulus and response, there's a space. And within that space is our power to choose. And you made a choice to move forward, even though it wasn't easy. It was painful. You had to deconstruct many layers. But in your humble opinion, it was the right thing to do, even if the world didn't give this stamp of approval for whatever reason. And I think there's so much courage within that, Caroline.
Yeah, I didn't get any sort of, I was the first of my peer group and my competitors to retire. in my age group. And I remember just being so sad about that. And I knew it was right, but it's also really hard. It was really painful to break up with this relationship that I'd had for 25 years of my life, basically, from I'm literally swimming out of the womb. Like, that's like how I began swimming as a little girl. And it's painful. And it's also painful to unpack the layers of things that transpired during the career that were also patterns that were painful, and trended towards things that, for example, was I competing to make everyone happy, or was I competing for myself? Or was I doing this to people please? Or was I doing this because I loved it? And when did this change that I, wanted to compete for fun? Wasn't it supposed to be to make, stats on the board, or to create a monetary gain for my sponsors? Or, like, there's just so much that I had to unpack about it. And at the same time, holding that emotion of pure gratitude for what I had gone through. And I agree. It's a very difficult thing for any athlete to move forward. And I get questions all the time still about, like, how did you know? How did you know when you were ready to retire? And these athletes are Olympians. These athletes are people that are competing at a high level right now. And they're asking these questions. And it can be scary to ask these questions, but it's okay, because it means you care about who you are as a human being. And it doesn't mean you're not going to perform well either.
Hmm.
Like, you can still perform well, but also inquire about what your meaning is in the sport. Like, what are you here for? What are you doing it for? And if you think of it like a relationship, I'm sure everyone listening to this has been through relationships in their life that haven't worked out. And if you think of it like a relationship, and you start to realize towards the end of a good relationship that this isn't for me. And it doesn't mean that I wasn't happy in it. It doesn't mean that I didn't have incredible times. It doesn't mean that it wasn't such a beautiful experience. It's just that I need to figure out me, and I need to go through something new in my life in order to experience new things and travel through those emotions in a different way versus the same exact thing over and over again.
For sure. I think there's so much bravery within that. Your good friend, Rich Roll, has a famous line that I really align with, which is, most people are living lives of quiet desperation. And I think part of the reason for that is that they get in this pattern, as you mentioned, that has familiarity, that becomes identity, that becomes, oh yeah, like, this is just like brushing my teeth. I go and I swim and I try to pursue the Olympic Games every 4 years. And at some point, it just becomes normal. It's normalcy versus, all right, this is an arena within this incredible thing called life that has so many different flavors to it. But then some people are like, all right, well, I kind of want to try a different flavor. I think I have more to offer in different arenas. And that doesn't mean that this arena was bad. It just means that it ran its course over the course of 25 years. And I'm ready to explore a different path. And what's so unique, and I think you'll really appreciate this statement, is, why the fuck do we have to continually justify that? Right? That's a really fun question to explore.
I'm so glad you said that, because it was so not sexy to go through this process of retiring. Because the first thing that people assume is you hate it, you quit, or, it's like there's never just an understanding of the fact that it's okay to just move forward. Like, and it does. I felt so afraid of losing friends, of not being a part of the community, of being the one that just ran away, or, damaged, washed up. Like, all of these things came up for me during this process. Like, I felt like I got completely cut off by the organizations that supported me. And it's not that that's happening. I mean, maybe that's a lot of perspective, but it's also, it's not sexy to talk about life outside of sport to people that are still in it either. And it's also not sexy to talk about it to anyone in an organization because you're the outlier or you're the one that's talking about the thing that like, like don't talk about that. Like, let's just talk about success and going hard in the paint and let's figure out, it wasn't sexy for me to go through the feelings that I went through. And I sort of felt like, and this sounds so weird. And sometimes I'm like, oh, why am I even saying this? I'm such a nerd. But I felt like this like pioneer in that space of transition because I was moving out of sport and also recognizing like, whoa, guys, hold on. Like, why are we all just either attaching so hard to it and never leaving it once you retire and you're like doing all the things to stay as connected as possible, or there's athletes that completely drop off the face of the earth and nobody talks to them ever again and they won X amount of medals and they were a great part of this and they were team captain here and now no one hears from them. Like, where's the in between here? Like, how can we find this like inclusive culture of sport to where people can be recognized and supported without completely cut off or just never leaving it ever? And it felt very not sexy. I love the world of it, but I definitely didn't feel supported in that. And it's scary saying that right now because it's scary saying those things out loud because you never want people to think you're ungrateful. But it's very difficult to make such a step back in 2010 when this kind of conversation about athlete mental wellness wasn't a conversation at all. And I was like this brain that was like, but wait, like we have to be healthier here. Like we have to understand who we are as humans. We have to be able to transition better. We have to be able to accept the sport that we loved while not running away from it. And we have to have a healthy attachment with it when we do leave. I don't know. It posed so many questions for me on that level as well. And and obviously that's a different level than the layers that I was dealing with internally. But just feeling like I really had to separate in order to heal. I was the one that ran away.
Peptides. There's been a lot of buzz about peptides and what they can do for the body, skin, muscles, and health. What exactly are they? And do they live up to the hype? Your body makes peptides. They are strings of amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. Peptide therapy involves using prescription-based peptides to help treat and manage a variety of health conditions to maximize performance. Peptides consist of 2 to 50 amino acids and are made naturally in the body to act as important signaling molecules for many physiological and cellular functions. There are over 7,000 known functions of peptides in the body, and adequate levels in the body are imperative for performing at optimal levels. Discover a transformative journey to optimal well-being with Live Peptides. Live Peptides offer a natural and effective approach to health support. Embrace the difference. Choose Live for a path to vitality that prioritizes quality, innovation, and your unique wellness goals. My personal favorite is BPC 157 with thymosin beta for optimizing gut health, tissue regeneration, and healing. Head over to livenatural.com and use code ALLSMITH for 20% off peptides. That's LIVVNATURAL.com with discount code ALLSMITH for 20% off peptides.
I was jumping around furniture in my house, and you'll hear a lot of gymnasts tell like a very similar story about starting out. Jumping around furniture, didn't want my mom didn't want me breaking her stuff. So she said, is there a gymnastics gym around? And it just so happened that within walking distance, literally like 3-4 blocks away from my house, was a gymnastics gym that had a very, very strong men's program, which is very rare. There's only a handful in the whole country, especially now, that have strong men's programs. And so I was just very lucky that the gym that was close by to my house had a program that had been building a lot of higher level men's gymnasts. They actually had an Olympian, a 2-time Olympian come out of that gym. Hundreds of NCAA athletes have come through the program, a bunch of other, junior level, high level competitors. So I just got lucky that I kind of was able to walk to a gym that kind of created the stepping stone process for me to become a gymnast.
Yeah, totally. So your mom said, get out of the house.
Yeah, exactly. I just said, do whatever you're doing, but just don't do it here.
I dig it, man. What was your original opinion of gymnastics? You know, you got in there, you see this really potentially intimidating place. You see people doing all kinds of, very acrobatic, cool things. What was the
Yeah.
the original onset of gymnastics for your headspace?
It's a playground, man, especially at first. Like I remember walking in the gym the first day. I remember walking in with my mom, holding her hand. I was 6 years old. I remember the date. It's kind of weird. I remember odd dates like that, but it was October 12th, 1986. That was the day I first walked into the gymnastics gym. I remember walking in, remember seeing all the kids. I remember the smell of like chalk and sweat and bare feet. You go to a gymnastics gym, it has a very distinct smell. And it was an older building, so it had a little bit of this like mildewiness to it. And I was hooked. I just love the idea of it being a huge playground. Like all the things I wanted to do in my backyard or on my mom's couch, I could actually do here, and they encouraged it. So for me, like I couldn't wait to get out there. But I realized after like my first couple of classes that I wasn't very good. Like I was athletic because I was playing other sports and I was pretty good in terms of just general awareness, but I was not a very good gymnast. Like I was just not something that came naturally to me. So at first, it was definitely a huge learning curve for me to be able to actually say, okay, this is something that I could actually potentially be good at.
Yeah, I think it's so cool too that if you were really good at it at the onset, you probably wouldn't have respected it as much.
Yeah.
And because you realized you had to really earn some of those skills and hone in on, the preciseness of holding of those positions, that it ultimately led to this incredible work ethic that you're tremendously known for. And so in the beginning, when you felt like you weren't that good, how did you start to groom and foster your work ethic to try to improve? Did you have mentors, or was there a process that you followed?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of it is innate. It's kind of an internal push. And it had to do with one, me just loving the sport, right? I love gymnastics. I love the challenge that comes along with gymnastics. People have asked me in the past, like, what was special about gymnastics versus the other sports that you played? And I love the idea of so few people being able to do a sport like gymnastics. I felt like you could be a superhero, right? Like I'm doing what only a fraction of the population in the whole world is capable of doing. So I love that idea of being able to say, okay, I'm doing something unique. And then to say, what is it going to take to be good at this thing that's so unique? And so I would just set small goals and be like, okay, there's 10 guys on my team and 8 of them are much better than me. What do I have to do to catch that next guy? What am I going to have to do just to not to get to the top guy, but just to that next guy and bump from number 8 to number 7? And, if I put in just the time and to be able to see that small incremental gain, that's like, just enough to be able to say that this process works, to be able to say that if I put in the time and the energy, and from a young age, the thing that I was always able to do is make the sacrifices to be able to do that. Like I wouldn't go to parties. I would I would be the first one at the gym all the time. I would be the last one to leave all the time. And sometimes not even like it was necessary, but just to prove a point that I would be willing to stay more than you are to be able to become just slightly better than you.
Mm-hmm.
So it was something that early on, I think, like I said, it was innate. It was something that I just wanted to strive to become better at.
Man, I really admire that. It's a process of mathematics, just the willingness to put in the time and the attention and the focus. Inevitably, you're gonna develop some of those skills.
Yeah.
How did you develop the mindset component of what I would describe as mindset chunking? So you just looked at the very next guy that was closest to you, and you wanted to try to develop the strength, the skill, and the application to try to catch him. How did you narrow that focus to just the next guy versus wanting to hit the home run to go after the top guy?
Well, I think whenever you're goal setting, you have to figure out what's realistic as well, right? Long-term goals are critical in terms of being able to achieve anything that's worth achieving. But having realistic goals along the way will give you the sense of satisfaction to say that the stepping stone process works. So for me, the Olympics was kind of the end all be all, right? I had Olympic rings all over my walls and, the idols from the Olympic Games around those times, posters on my walls and those kind of things. But I knew that it wasn't realistic within the next, 2 decades for something like that to actually happen. So what you needed to do is be able to say, what's realistic within a shorter timeline? What's realistic within this year or this competition season or within this month or within this workout? And you can, like you said, chunk it within a more manageable timepiece so that you can actually see whether or not you're doing the right things to be able to see progress. So I would break it down even workout by workout, event by event, skill by skill. And so this was something that became much more strategic as I became a little further in my career. I did it kind of haphazardly early on, just something that I thought might work. But as I got later into my career with more advanced coaching and people that had better plans in place, I saw that this was actually a process that really works. And my Stanford coach, the one who's the head coach now, he's the one that kind of formulated it for me much more strategically, where every training session had a much clearer picture image around it. And you're going to do on this event, you're going to have this number of skills, this number of routines, this number of half routines that you're going to have to complete. And if you complete those things, it's going to allow you to bump to the next level or bump to the next event or whatever it might be. So this idea of chunking can be broken down into such a small piece that becomes much more achievable. So I think that's something that people sometimes miss. They're really good at setting big goals and even kind of medium-term goals, but it becomes really hard to set the really small goals that allow you to use as a stepping stone to the next process. And it was something that for me made sense maybe earlier on that allowed me to kind of chip away from those people that were a little bit better at than me early on in my life.
Yeah, that's really cool, Dave. I'm seeing so much correlation here between, the irony of your connection with cooking. It starts with those small ingredients and how you marinate the onions and the garlic that help, master the craft at the end.
Yeah.
And then you look at how you've mindset chunked some of your gymnastics. Like, people know this broad and inclusive success that you've experienced, but they don't know the hours, the blood, the sweat, the tears, the micro moments that go into some of these floor routines, some of these ring routines, and some of these pommel horse routines.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really cool, just the irony as to a quick little peek behind the curtain as to how you've kind of formulated some of these processes and procedures, which has ultimately led to precise skill and technique-driven coaching within the methodologies of Power Monkey Fitness.
100%. I think you're spot on there, and I appreciate you doing some research with regards to some of the other things that kind of encapsulate who I am as a person, not just gymnastics, the other things I enjoy in my life. I approach it in the same way, and I think the minutia of things always excited me in gymnastics. Like I look at gymnastics as an art form, not as a sport, and so I always thought that refining positions and if you think about, like, I've used this analogy before, but skill development or routine development in the gymnastics world, I look at as creating a sculpture essentially. And starts out as a big block of marble, and you take those big chunks out of the marble first, and then you start getting the little chisel out and you start making some more refined pieces. And then over time, you start getting the polish out. And skill development is the exact same thing. Whether you're trying to learn a gymnastics movement or put a routine together, the same thing needs to happen. You need to get global perspective of what your body is doing. Then you need to understand maybe how to put some of the mobility components in place. And do I have the core strength to be able to manage some positions? And then let me refine it. And then let me make it look beautiful. Then let me make it look effortless. And then at that point, other people can look at it and say, I can probably do that. I'm looking at something that's virtually impossible, but that person is making it look effortless to the point where, you know what, maybe I can even do that. And that's where the art form of gymnastics comes in. And I love that process. And so for me, the breaking it down into the minutia, the chunks was something that I gravitated towards. I loved the little pieces. The details are something that weren't like an afterthought for me. Those are the things I tried to focus on. And so for me, I love that part of the process of gymnastics, and it's kind of led me into using that same mentality in other aspects of my life.
I really honor that, man. It's so cool too. Like, oftentimes the outcome is what gets celebrated, but the outcome is just such a magical moment.
Yeah.
That is the process of as you mentioned, the minutia. We talk about some of this skill development. We talk about your love for the sport when you first got intro to gymnastics. Was there a moment within your training when you were very young where you came to the realization of, wow, I actually think I can do this? And was there a particular individual that exuded tremendous belief that gave you permission to feel like, hey, this is a roadmap and a pathway that maybe I can go down?
I don't think there was any one particular moment. Mine was much more gradual. Mine was something that happened slowly over time, and I never made really huge leaps and bounds within the sport. Everything happened kind of step by step. So I wouldn't say that there was ever a moment where I said, you know what, this is something where I could see myself creating a career out of it, or it being something that I become good at. It was just the next logical step. Like I would make a regional team, or I competed at my first state championship, then regionals, and then nationals, and made my first national team, got a college scholarship. And these were all the next natural progression for what I had previously done. But I will say that my coaches early on played such a critical role in me falling in love with the sport. And I think that that's so important, especially with all of the negative things that are coming out about gymnastics over the last few years, rightfully so, about people growing up with terrible coaches and people that are just monsters within the sport, and not just gymnastics, but you see it in some other sports as well. I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by coaches that were very nurturing, and what they did was they created a team environment. And gymnastics, I think most people look at gymnastics as an individual sport. You're out there on the platform by yourself, raising your hand to the judges, to the audience, and performing by yourself. But in any gymnastics competition at a higher level, the Olympics, World Championships, NCAA, you're competing as part of a team. And that team aspect was pushed onto me very early on. Like I said, I went to a club that had a very strong boys program, and we had one of the biggest boys teams in the entire country. And I learned what it meant to be able to compete for someone else, not for yourself, and with someone else, and putting forward a score that contributed to something bigger. And so my coaches facilitated that love for team competition within an individual sport, and say, I'm going out there not to compete for myself, not to win a medal to hang around my neck, but to be able to contribute to the better collective. And I love that aspect of it. And so my coaches early on in Jersey growing up went to Surgeons Elite, one of the best gyms that's still around. They have three facilities in Jersey still. They taught me what it was like to compete in an individual sport as part of a team. And it was something that pulled me into the rest of my career. And it's actually, again, something that plays a huge role in terms of how I run the Power Monkey team now. How important every single person is within the community. No matter what you do within our team, you are a facet that matters just as anyone else does. And I learned that from my coaches early on.
That's cool, man. You're so articulate. I feel like I'm watching the documentary of Dave Durante, like as you speak. It's like a Netflix show that I'm kind of watching right now with the imagery that you're describing. I'm stoked you had an awesome experience with regards to your growth and progression within gymnastics. But just to paint a picture for some of our listeners, at least from my humble understanding, I think the lifestyle of a young gymnast is hard. You're in the gym 5+ hours a day. It's not the traditional experience that most children have of, cereal in the morning and maybe watching some cartoons and maybe a little bit of playtime or building of forts or crayons or this, that, and the other. There's a lot of focused time. You mature very fast. Your relationship with yourself is very different. You're conscious of food. You're conscious of proprioception and the comparison that you mentioned against others, where for some people, maybe they lose the art of play, not for everybody, but it can become a little bit more of a serious nature. Can you describe that for some of our listeners and how you navigated those moments as a young gymnast?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I don't know if this is unique to gymnastics. Maybe it is, but I think in this world now where we're seeing so much more sports specificity early on, kids playing baseball and doing, traveling teams at 10 years old and going around the country and not having an off season and, specialized coaches. You're seeing it much more in other sports today. But what I will say about gymnastics specifically is that you're spot on. Gymnastics is not the kind of sport that you can become good or even adequate at by spending a couple days a week in the gym at. Now, I want to make it clear that that's okay. Like, it's okay to go to gymnastics 2 and 3 days a week and just love being in the gym and playing around and not having the goal of going to the Olympics or competing for a collegiate team. I think that's sometimes a misconception that if you're in the gym, your goal is to compete at a high level. No, gymnastics is an incredible foundation for any other sport that you want to go on to do. Gymnastics for me was just the one that stuck. Like I said, I played a lot of other sports and I enjoyed them, but my body type, kind of my build was spot on for gymnastics. So it kind of worked out really well for that. But I did miss out on a lot of other things. I think I did grow up more quickly than some of my other friends because of the emphasis that I had to put onto my time in the gym, putting in hour after hour, not really having much free time. Like, my day was, you wake up, rush through school, you get through school, and school is also a very big priority to me. It was something I put a lot of emphasis on, making sure that I was keeping up with good grades and trying to have good enough quality to be able to apply to a top university, going straight to the gym, doing homework in the car, coming home, eating dinner after my family had eaten dinner, and my mom being the only one around because everyone else had gone to bed or, gone to do other things. And so I had a little bit more of an isolated experience than the rest of my family because I was in the gym. Now, the good thing is that I had a support system there that allowed me to feel comfortable with it. My family and my siblings supported me endlessly to be able to make me feel like what I was doing was necessary. It was necessary for the goals that I had. But it's not for everyone. And I think that's important to note. Like, not everyone needs to feel like they need to go through this pressure cooker at 10 years old to be able to feel like they need to achieve very high levels of success. I feel like I missed out on some things. I had tons of injuries and mental blocks, and like seeing a sports psychologist in high school to be able to work through a lot of the mental things that come along with the challenges of being an aspiring elite athlete. It is challenging, and it's not like a walk in the park that the end result sometimes paints the picture out to be. But for me personally, it was the path that I chose. My parents were always very clear that if it was something that I didn't want to do anymore, that I could stop. They always wanted me to do something. So if gymnastics is not going to be your thing, go play another sport, go do something else. But they were never forcing me to do it. And I think that allowed me to make the decision as to whether or not I wanted to pursue something that was so time consuming.
Nice. I really appreciate you sharing that, because some of those stories that we hear and some of the experiences that we see young gymnasts go through are pretty challenging. And it's always unique to hear how different people navigate those treacherous waters. And you've mentioned Stanford a little bit. How did you ultimately find your way to Stanford, and what was your college experience like?
I was very fortunate, to be honest with you. When I was 13 or 14, I went to our junior nationals, which is like the biggest national competition for under 18 gymnasts. And I qualified to the junior national, which was in Oakland that year. And I went to Oakland, we competed, but we made a side trip to go visit Stanford. Because at the time, mid-90s, Stanford was unstoppable. 92, 93, 94, they took second. 95, they won 3 out of 4 years. They were this little pocket window where they were just unbelievable. And I will mention that they are, again, right now, currently unstoppable again. They are just by far the best collegiate program in the country. They're not going to lose another competition for another decade or so.
Wow.
But
what an honor to say that that's
right.
where you went, man. That's pretty cool stuff.